So it's really important for me to know if I'm designing something for a screen, then opening it in Photoshop at 100% is going to show me what someone else will see on their screen. Sounds obvious? Very tricky for students. Very tricky. Because in this day and age, you're rarely designing for just a screen. What else do we have to design for?
Google,
iPads, which has changed everything about designing for a screen. What else?
The phone.
The phone. We need something that can be legible at a certain size, that has the right contrast in different light levels, something we never really thought about before. And what about
Video.
You're both right. And I wasn't looking for video when I held this up. Video and print. Video has a certain resolution, a certain size. How many people have HDTV now? Almost everybody. HDTV, mostly when you're buying an HDTV, what do you need to know? What's one of the big selling points of an HDTV other than cost and brand? Like, what's the label? There are a couple different flavors of HDTV.
Like 720p, 1080p.
1080i. Have you heard those numbers? Anyone know what those actually mean?
pixels that are across the screen.
Exactly. So when you're buying a television now, you actually have to know what a pixel is. Or not. You can trust the salesperson. Give them your money. But that's, so when you're buying a television set, now pixel dimension, or what we call resolution, or you might hear dots per inch, or points per inch, DPI, PPI. That's a big selling point for televisions. So what's the difference between 720V or 720p and 1080i, say? Does anyone know what that number actually is? What's the 720 or the 1080?
It's how many pixels within a certain amount of space.
Nope.
No. It's the amount of lines in it.
Everyone go to Photoshop and do File, New. So File, New, most of you probably see inches there. I'm going to click on inches and change that to pixels. It's giving us width, height, resolution, color mode, and background. I don't care about background. I only want to look at width, height, resolution, and color mode. Now, until just recently, I could make the following statement and be correct. All screens in the world are 72 pixels per inch. Until Apple introduced some products and decided that they were going to make screen resolution one of the biggest selling points, every monitor, every digital television had the same resolution, 72 pixels per inch. 72 PPI, or in the printing world, 72 DPI, either pixels per inch, these are pixels, or on a page, dots per inch. This is the most important concept in Photoshop, and what trips up so many of my students. You need to know what device you're designing for. And by extension, you need to know what devices you might need to support in the future when you're doing anything in Photoshop. So when I design this background image, let's go back. I'm going to click Cancel. And I'm going to Image, Image Size. You don't actually have to do this. I'm just going to Image, Image Size to get some information here. 1440 pixels by 900 pixels. That's the size of my background image, my cardboard. 1440 by 900, 72 pixels per inch. Do those numbers look familiar to anybody in the room using a Macintosh right now? If they don't, let me hide Photoshop for a minute. And I'm going to go to my monitor icon at the top. Notice 1440 by 900. What does that mean? I'll just tell you that's the preferred resolution for my laptop. Right now I've shifted to 1024 because of the way that it's sending out pixels really through that projector. So what's that 1440 by 900? Why is that the same number here and in Photoshop? Why would I design an image that's 1440 by 900?
This is a standard size screen.
Kind of.
It's the resolution for a standard screen.
Not exactly. It is a standard size resolution. But there are many different resolutions for laptops. In fact, those of you with PCs, which is nobody, you're kidding me, one. Sure. If you run a PC, chances are that's going to be 1366 by 720 as the default resolution. Wait a minute, 720. Where did we hear that 720 before?
How did you get that box, that image size box? What did you click on?
So I did the image menu and went to image size. 1440 by 900 here. I just said if this was a PC, my resolution might be 1366 by 720. Where did we hear that 720 number a few minutes ago? What's that?
720p, we were talking about TVs.
720p. 720 is a common number here. What's that referring to? When you buy an HD TV, that 720 is telling you how many pixels vertically. Either 720 pixels vertically or 1080 vertically. So what's the difference? Why should you pay more money for that 1080 versus the 720? Is it worth it? What do you mean by higher definition?
Well, it's like lines of resolution. If you have, it's like sort of using the expression like when you were zooming in and saw those boxes bigger and bigger and bigger. If you're getting 1080 lines of pixels in the same amount of space that you were only getting 720, it means you're getting smaller pixels, and if you're getting smaller pixels, it means you're getting better resolution, you're getting higher definition.
Isn't it? So, yes. Could I demonstrate that by just doing this? When you buy a 720 screen, it might look like this. Let's say that's 720. And let's say this is 1080. What's the difference? Smaller. Well, what did we say happens when we zoom out far enough with that jagged text? Yes. Your TV also uses little colored squares. Everything is made out of squares. The smaller the squares are, the better the illusion that they're not squares. Got it? So Photoshop is all about changing the color of squares. So if I wanted to use a select tool, remember the first tool that we clicked to see other tools underneath it was this rectangular marquee, which I still have to call the select tool. That's what it used to be called. That tool lets me select an area. So I'm going to use that tool, click and drag to select an area, and I'm going to hit delete or backspace. And it's saying, do you want to fill that area with foreground color? I'll say yes. I'll just click OK. And what's going to happen? And that's okay. If it doesn't, you can change that to foreground color. It might say background or pattern or fill or something like that. What's going to happen if I zoom in on one corner of what I just did in Photoshop, where everything's made of bits? Pixels. I'm going to zoom in on that corner. What's going to happen? What are we going to see? Eventually, it's going to turn into squares, but it's always going to be sharp. If you're creating something that's square, cool. I don't have to do anything special, right? Because squares make squares. You can have a nice corner on a square. You don't have to worry about it being smooth. But what's going to happen if I do a circle? So instead of doing a square, I'm going to click and drag for that elliptical shape. Do a circle. Do backspace. Foreground color. Now I'm going to use the same magnifying glass and zoom in. Let's see what happens on the edge. Zooming in to my circle, what's happening?
The edges are getting jagged.
That's Photoshop. Photoshop is all about you changing the color of squares and making sure you can zoom out far enough so that you don't notice they're squares. And that's why if we look at this image here, which just looks like a mosaic, if I zoom out, eventually it becomes my grandparents' house. All made of little colored squares. So that's Photoshop. You can explore all of these tools on your own. Hovering over a tool tells me what that tool is going to do.